stop. Don't scroll, because what you're about to hear changes everything. This story begins with an announcement, and it wasn't a normal announcement. World Economic Forum, Davos, cameras rolling, global leaders seated in front. And then standing there with full confidence, the President of the United States makes a stunning claim. America has secured exclusive sovereign rights over Greenland's mineral resources. This wasn't just a foreign policy statement. This was a financial nuclear bomb. The market treated it as fact. Headlines exploded. Tweets went viral. And the moment those words were spoken, Greenland Resources Corp., a dead penny stock no one cared about, suddenly came back to life. Within hours, the stock went from 2 to 200. Pension funds jumped in. Institutional investors piled on. Everyday people rushed to buy. Why? Because everyone believed they were witnessing the deal of the century. Nobody asked for documents. Nobody checked the legal reality. They saw only one thing. The president said it. And when power and money speak at the same time, people usually stop asking questions. That's the moment this story stops being about politics and becomes something far more dangerous, a financial trap. Now, this is where things get interesting, because none of this was an accident. This was a perfectly timed operation. On January 10, the first rumor leaks. Sources tell Fox Business that a historic agreement with Greenland is close. That's all it takes. Greenland Resources Corp., a company with no real staff, no production, no valid mining operation, suddenly starts moving. The stock jumps from 2 to 5. Then January 15 brings the next push. A presidential tweet drops. Greenland is coming home. Huge news soon. That tweet wasn't for policy. It was for the market. Retail investors pile in. Online communities start calling it Louisiana Purchase 2. Momentum explodes. On January 20, there's a press briefing. The press secretary holds up a thick, leather-bound document for the cameras but releases no text, just visuals, just theater. The stock blasts past 80, and then comes January 22. Davos, the world stage. This is the climax. The president publicly names a specific company and says, "We have total control." That single sentence sends the stock to 200. For a brief moment, its market cap overtakes companies like Ford. This timeline was not a coincidence. Every step had a purpose. Every date had a target. All of it was engineered for one thing only, a 72-hour window where insiders could sell at the top while the rest of the world stayed in the dark. Now we reach the point where the entire story collapses inside the document. That leather-bound file you saw waved around at press briefings and rallies, it wasn't a treaty. Not a mining contract, not a transfer of sovereignty. According to the Arctic Papers, it was nothing more than a non-binding memorandum of understanding, a routine one, student exchange programs, Arctic research cooperation, joint studies on polar ecosystems, polar bears, climate data, science. That's it. No mining rights, no mineral access, no clause blocking China, nothing even close. Denmark never signed away Greenland, no sale, no lease. And Greenland's local parliament in Nuuk never approved anything of the sort. But here's where it turns dark. Trump's team knowingly mistranslated the document and then presented it to the world as if it were a property deed. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a conscious decision. Internal emails make it clear they knew the claims were false, they knew Denmark would issue a public denial, and they knew exactly when that denial would come. Their plan wasn't to convince governments. It was to beat the clock. They needed the market to do its job before the truth caught up. 3 days of lies, 3 days of hype, 3 days of money, and at that moment, everything becomes clear. This wasn't diplomacy that failed. Diplomacy was weaponized, used as a tool to loot the market. And when the real contents of the document finally surface, this stops looking like a bad deal and starts looking like something far worse. If anyone was still claiming this was all just a misunderstanding, the emails bury that lie for good. What's inside the Arctic Papers isn't reaction, it's pre-planning. January 5, long before Davos, a senior White House advisor emails a hedge fund contact. We are underwater on the yen trade. Margin calls are coming next week. We need a bridge. That's not the language of policy. That's the language of panic. The reply comes back. GRC vehicle is ready. We control 85% of the float. We just need a catalyst, volume, And then the most damning line of all, can the big guy drop the news before Tuesday? That single sentence says everything. The purpose of the news wasn't to inform the public. It was to move the price. Then comes the January 12 email, even more explicit. Denmark's objections are mentioned. The Prime Minister is refusing to take the call. The response? Doesn't matter. We just need the headline to stick for 72 hours. Just 72 hours, 3 days. That's all the time insiders needed to exit at the top. This is proof of intent. They knew the deal was fake, they knew a denial was coming, and they still chose deliberately to mislead the market. These emails aren't speculation, they read like written confessions. And when intent exists in writing, this stops being just a scandal. At that point, it becomes something else entirely. Securities fraud. Now the question becomes very simple. Who made the money and why? The Arctic papers leave no room for guesswork. Greenland Resources Corp was an empty shell, a P.O. box address, no real operations, and a CEO who it turns out was actually a ski instructor. The real power was somewhere else. The company's shares were hidden behind a maze of LLCs, the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and Cyprus. That structure isn't random. It has one purpose only, to hide beneficial ownership. Then comes Cash Out Day, January 22. The day of the Davos speech. The stock touches 200. That same day, 3 offshore entities quietly start dumping shares into the market. No panic, no crash. They sell into the rally while pension funds, retail investors, and Trump supporters are still buying. Total extracted $4.2 billion. So why the rush? Because they needed cash immediately. Emails and bank records show the same family office was massively leveraged in Japan's yen carry trade. When the Bank of Japan raised rates, a $3.5 billion margin call hit. Miss that payment and the entire empire collapses. That's the key. The Greenland hoax wasn't an opportunity, it was a rescue mission. The public was turned into exit liquidity. American investors' money was used to pay Japanese banks. Middle-class savings were siphoned off to cover elite gambling losses. And this is where the story crosses a moral line. This wasn't just market manipulation anymore. It became a planned wealth transfer in plain sight, fully intentional, and executed without hesitation. And then the system finally wakes up. Before the market can even close, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission slams a trading halt. Greenland Resources Corp is frozen in place. Game over before the crash can even happen. Minutes later, the SEC's Enforcement Division makes it official. This is a case of market manipulation and insider trading. The law here isn't vague, it isn't political, it's mechanical. SEC Rule 10.5 is crystal clear. If you knowingly spread false information, use it to move a stock price, and profit from that move, it's a crime. And every box is checked. False statements were made. They were made publicly. The stock was pumped. Insiders sold. It's a textbook case. For the U.S. Department of Justice, the questions get even more dangerous. Indicting a sitting president is legally complex, may be impossible in the short term. But advisors, shell company operators, straw CEOs, they're fully exposed. Emails, wire transfers, encrypted messages, every email is a count, every transfer is a count. That's federal wire fraud. On the civil side, class action lawsuits are already lining up. Discovery is coming. Documents will be forced out. Nothing stays buried. And this is where the political collapse begins. Because this time the victims aren't the opposition. This time the victims are his own base. The people who trusted, the people who bought in, the people who put their savings on the line. For a populist leader, there is no greater sin than this, stealing from your own people. The slogans change. Not resist, but refund. This scam breaks something rallies and speeches never could, belief. And from here on, this isn't a scandal that fades with the news cycle. This is a legal process, slow, relentless, and irreversible. After this point, there is no recovery. Only indictments, only damage control. And only one unavoidable conclusion, that deal never existed. And now the bill has finally come due.